raised a fighter, not a warrior. I fight up hateful comments to the racial slurs. I fight to keep my identity instead. Hashtag not in my name, just to show you I will fight for my religion, but I won't fight you. There is a difference. I was raised a fighter, straight out of the womb, fighting against this world with so much division and intolerance. But my fight isn't with you. My fight comes from the snowy mountaintops, the green valleys, the vibrant stone of the Levis Lazuli. To defend my ethnicity, you find so hard to accept, but I will defend with love and tolerance. Resisting with my native mother who taught me how to speak, because cheesy shirina zuban modernis, jangiman voz de lanonis.
Hi everyone, my name is Frishta Bastan, aka Fresh Poetry. I am a spoken word artist and performer. I've been writing for about 10 years and I've been performing for about 6. My poems are extremely politically charged. I write about my identity, being Afghan Canadian. I write about how I feel about the situation in Afghanistan. I like to use it as a way to kind of educate the audience on the ongoing conflict there. I also like to shed light on the reality of Afghan lives. I like to kind of use my poetry as an outlet as to what I'm thinking about and what I care about. Most oftentimes when I go and perform, a lot of folks come up to me afterwards and tell me that they had no idea that X, Y, and Z were happening in Afghanistan because I showcase it in my poems. That's mainly one of the reasons I actually started writing, was because I had all of this thoughts and all these feelings about my identity, what it meant to be Canadian, being born here, but having all this like hidden, mysterious identity that came from my parents, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I was so deeply connected to it, even though I've never really visited the land. It's the land itself and the connection itself that kind of drove me to be curious about it, to learn more about it. Poetry does still surround this identity crisis of am I more Afghan, am I more Canadian? And I like to showcase this in my art. The reasons I started writing was because I was consistently battling this idea of who I am and what I cared about, and I wanted to kind of express it to everybody and kind of show everybody what was going through my head. And I still don't have an answer. I still use it consistently, and I am still trying to figure out how to make sense of this whole hyphenated identity, and I do it through my poetry. I'm like extremely connected with Afghan classical music. So when I am writing, I do find myself listening to very classical instruments like the rhubarb. Absolutely love the rhubarb, so I find myself listening to that to kind of help me collect my thoughts. Also, the rhubarb is also kind of like a warrior instrument, so when I'm writing my spoken word, it kind of puts me in the mood of a warrior. And Afghans, you know, we're all warriors. We're very resilient people, so it kind of puts me into that, it gives me that perspective of like this angry but hopeful kind of outlook. So obviously spoken word is a performative poetry, so it has a lot of energy. You have to be very invested in the poem in order for the poem to connect the audience. So it is extremely exhausting. There's a lot of mental and emotional labor that goes into writing them and performing them, as well as the shorter poems as well, because you are in a vulnerable state. You're writing about things that matter to you personally. You don't know if people are going to relate to it. And every single time that I write something and I'm performing it for the first time, I'm always, a little hesitant because I don't know how it's going to go over. But what reminds me, what keeps pushing me, is that my poetry is for myself, first and foremost, before it is for anybody else. So what motivates me to keep writing and to keep performing, no matter how exhausting it gets, is the fact that I feel like I'm kind of connected to my Afghan diaspora. I'm connected to the Afghan community much more when I am writing and performing, because it's essentially supposed to be a form of healing as well for the Afghan people, or at least I hope it is. So taking all this into consideration while I'm writing, while I'm performing, it does take a toll, but what motivates me to keep going is the fact that this is my connection, this is my bridge to my Afghan community. Definitely the struggle of being a poet is that you're kind of seen as this lower tier artist. So organizations will kind of put musicians above you or other artists above you, painters, and whereas poetry, they kind of think it's this easy thing. So I often do feel very neglected because I'll be given different treatment. So it's hard to keep doing what I do because I'll go to an event and I know that they're paying the other performers, but they're kind of hesitant to pay me because apparently my poetry is an easier art, which is absolutely not the case. Every art has its own difficulty. But I guess also being a woman as well, because when I first started writing, I actually had a lot of backlash in the Afghan community. You know, it'd be kind of like, you know, why is this woman performing? Why is she so mad on stage? Why is she so loud? Like, I actually used to get a lot of hate messages on Facebook who used to say things like, I'm doing it for fun, I was doing it for attention, I didn't really actually mean anything I actually said, and that I was immature and I'd get over it. It was cute. Oh my god, I hated that. I hated when Afghan men used to say that what I was doing is cute. Because apparently a woman being angry on stage is just cute and it's not worth anything. Whereas my male counterparts who would be doing the same kind of poetry would be giving like this utmost respect. And obviously, you know, the patriarchy plays a huge role in how I am treated as a performer. It's definitely gotten better because I feel like it's now, spoken word is now becoming an art that people are appreciating, especially with the Afghan community, they're being exposed to it. But what really surprised me is that poetry is embedded in our blood. So I had a hard time understanding why Afghans were so hesitant to accepting my art. So it was always a struggle, kind of making my way around, you know, showing up at events, being asked to perform, but not being paid. You know, it was always kind of like, okay, well, do I go to this event and get exposure and don't get paid, put in all this emotional labor, but then knowing that, you know, the musician was getting paid. So it was this kind of like struggle I had to go through a couple times, but you eventually learn to put your foot down and be like, enough is enough. You know, you cannot be exploited, basically. And I feel like a lot of artists are. The Afghan community really needs to support their artists, and I know there are ways where we're showcasing them, but there really needs to be more support for artists, you know, or the exposure they need, because we choose and pick and choose what deserves exposure, what doesn't deserve exposure, which is a little ridiculous, but that is the case. Although it is getting better, it still needs a lot of work, and I think being an Afghan woman, I've seen the struggle of, you know, being bold in my poetry, having a little bit of backlash, but then overcoming that backlash. Because now my biggest fans are older, like khalas and kakas. Like, I will go to an event now and, you know, the majority of people coming up to me are actually the older generation who are like telling me like, Bachin, you know, you're doing an amazing job, keep going, which was never the case in the beginning. So it's definitely getting better, and I am, you know, seeing more and more of the Afghan community being more appreciative towards it. But definitely, it still needs a lot of work. We're still very selective in our art and who we appreciate. My future goals of fresh poetry. I didn't even think I was gonna get this far, to be completely honest, which probably sounds like, you know, a little silly, but I did not ever in a million years think that fresh poetry would be like a brand almost. And I'm extremely grateful for my friends and my family who pushed me, who kept encouraging me to keep writing and to keep performing, because there were times where I didn't want to anymore. I think moving forward is kind of taking my art, you know, more seriously. For the longest time, it was like kind of like a part-time gig, and I want it to be a full-time thing where I invest as much as I possibly can into it. And, you know, it starts by publishing my first poetry book, which will come out soon. I I am currently working on my first poetry collection. It's called Sher. The reason why I chose Sher is because Afghanistan is known as the land of the lions. So obviously Sher and lion is in Dari, in Farsi, and Sher as in poetry. So I wanted the book to kind of embody A, the people, Afghan resilience, and B, what it is. So the word Sher meant a lot to me in terms of my identity and of course the poetry itself. That is coming out soon. I hope to have that done and published this year. Okay, shameless promotion. On Instagram as Fresh Poetry, on Facebook as Fresh Poetry. I do post as much as I can on there. So yeah, if you need to connect with me, feel free to follow me on Instagram as Fresh Poetry and like my page on Facebook as also Fresh Poetry.